wanted to get into, of course, hashtag dad life, because that's how we always start each and every episode. But this week specifically, how to build your child's confidence. How do you get that? Because I think it's so easy as a parent to tell them everything. Hey, all you got to do is this, whatever this is. Or here's unfortunately, the epitome of many parents. You're going to coach them right after they've been coached, after the game, in the car, on the way home. And that is the perfect one-on-one time, because all you want to do is build their confidence. And I think, unfortunately, so often that turns into lectures. And I remember reading an article a number of years back. Nonetheless, I feel and can only assume it's still relevant today, which is the most, it definitely didn't use the word despised, but the situation that kids hated most was the car ride home. And I think that's unfortunate, because I think we can all assume what goes on if that's the case. So the kids hated that the most out of experiences within their sporting ventures, within their sporting experiences, that car ride home. So, Jalen, I'll throw that ball in your court first with regards to confidence. How do you build it, first of all?
I think first and foremost, the easiest thing is going to be letting them actually learn a mistake and learn from those mistakes. I know we've talked about it in a few episodes now, just letting kids learn their mistakes, but that's just one that builds that confidence because you're able to understand exactly what.
Hold on. Let me pause you right there, because how do you build confidence if you're messing up?
See, the key word there was learning from mistakes. So a lot of parents do want to coach. They're like, oh, why are you not doing this right? Or why are you not doing that? My view on it and the way that I handle our 4-year-old and our 1.5-year-old is I let them do something to the fullest. I'm like, that's going to hurt. I can tell you not to do it, or I can just let you find out that it's going to hurt. And I'm going to say, hey, bud, don't do that. That's going to hurt. So I'm always a fan of just letting my kids learn by doing. And so I will definitely just back off. If I see them starting to do something that's going to hurt or that they're doing wrong, I'll tell them how I think they should be doing it. But if they refuse to listen, I am not one to either pull them away from it and be like, no, I'll do it and I'll show you how to do it. I'm like, no, if you're about to get hurt, I want to see you get hurt. Not for any sadistic reason, purely to just be there for them and a little bit of I told you so's, but then re-explain to them, that's why I told you that we don't want to do it this way because that was the result, and allow them to learn from that. I always reiterate when whether it's explaining to them why they're getting punished or why something didn't go their way. I always ask them, why do you think that happened? Why did that happen? What could we do differently next time, so that they can build that confidence and understanding, okay, so that's how I handled the situation. This is how I should be handling the situation. And I find that it allows for my kids to also be a lot more open when they're potentially going to make a mistake to hearing me out versus every time I'm back to something, dad just gets mad at me and then flies off the handles and I don't know what his issue is. So that's how I would suggest building confidence. Let your kids make those mistakes. My 4-year-old stubs his toes at least 4 or 5 times a day. And it's, buddy, you got to watch out for the table. I don't know how to exactly build confidence in that situation, but he still has confidence to sprint around the house, even though it is not working out for him. But Nick, you come from a coaching background in soccer specifically. So I'm sure you have a tons of examples of building that confidence when it comes to kids that are fresh in the sport or kids that are having that slump. How do you go about it in that instance?
Yeah, 2 things come to mind. And one is, you alluded to me being a coach. And I think that's such an important pillar in kids' lives, is the coach. Because I think we don't have to look too far to give an example of that coach that takes away confidence.
Yeah.
It's so, I know I mentioned this in last week's podcast, but I'll echo it again based on this week's topic. It's so easy to tear confidence down and take it away, and it's so hard to build it up. And I think coaches play a massive influence regardless of what sport a kid plays. Is that whole rings true? One thing that I would personally do is have conversations about it. Get them off of the playing field, understanding that confidence is such a vital piece of any player's ability to improve, and talk about it. A question I posed to players that I coached was, do you have to play well to gain confidence? Or do you have confidence to then play well? And I think it does vary based on the individual, because we're wired differently. And it annoys me when I hear, oh, they were just born that way. Like, you had some kind of skill set. And I think more importantly, you understood, if somebody does have that confidence, they understood the importance of self-talk.
Yeah.
How does that inner voice speak to you? Because a lot of our inner voices tear us down. And then I think once people recognize that little trick of the trade of, how do I speak to myself? And is it a voice that helps me or hurts me? And more importantly, when you figure out that it's a voice that's hurting me, I get to control
Yeah.
that, right? That's not up to Jalen to determine my inner voice. That's not up to my coach. With that being said, those coaches, those adults, parents included, play a massive factor in what my self talk does. So if
Yeah.
I hear my parents tearing me down, saying that wasn't good enough, that wasn't good enough, guess what? My inner voice is probably telling me I'm not good enough. And
Yeah.
it's a knock on effect.
Yeah.
So it's a very fragile space for sure.
Yeah, and
Um,
so the thing that comes to mind for me on that one is the analogy of a well-built boat doesn't sink no matter what storm it's in. And so it's when we're talking about confidence, that's probably the best way to describe what confidence actually is you are able to continue forward in what you need to do, even though you're not seeing the results from it or from the benefits of that work, whether that's working out and not seeing those results very quickly, but still having the confidence to go back into the gym and just take another day at it, or you're not excelling at your sport or whatever activity that you're wanting to do well at. Confidence is a muddled topic in all honesty, but that's the analogy that I always come back to in my mind of that boat that no matter what kind of is rattling you, you're still able to get up and go and do it and keep advancing in where you want to be. For that parenting coach, because I think that's the
yep.
biggest one that a lot of people are easily able to
Relate
connect
to maybe.
to. I want to coach my kids. If you're not the coach, how do you not turn that car ride home into a lecture and instead prop up what your kid does well in a meaningful and beneficial way for your kid, and also talk to them about how to excel in the areas, or talk to them about how they can be better in some areas, because I think that's a fine line that we as parents are always having to walk of either or explaining to our kids. The hardest thing that we're trying to do is walk down that line of explaining to the kids of how they can be a better person while not destroying their confidence. So what is that for you, Nick? What are some things that come to mind of building that confidence but in a meaningful and relationship building way that's, father figure or mother figure, anyone that's a parent or that is a role model, you expect them to tell you what you're doing wrong. So
Sure.
that's definitely not what we're trying to say is avoid these conversations and just be nice and fluff pieces for your kids' entire
Right.
lives.
Yeah, I think number one, I'll answer a different question first, and that is how do you build that inner voice? I think from a young age, young meaning I think you can start when you're 4, 5, 6 years old, and maybe it's an activity that you create for them, but
Yeah.
have them create that self talk of I can do blah blah blah. I'm good enough to blah blah blah, and saying those things out loud. I've heard of people creating those routines with their kids. I think that's a pretty unique way of building that self talk to say I am good enough to do this.
Yep.
Because again, you're just creating a habit from a young age. But to answer your question of that car ride home, how can you maybe facilitate a discussion without it turning into a lecture? Have questions
Hmm.
that start with what and how. How did you think you did today,
Yeah.
Emerson? What
Yeah.
did you think you did well today, Emerson? And oh, I worked really hard and I did this. And you're like,
Yeah.
oh, good job. Maybe you just leave it at that. Or
Yeah.
do you anything else that you felt like you did well at? And now you're getting them to talk and lead that conversation. It's not you leading that conversation. Or maybe it is a question of did you feel like there was anything you didn't do well today? Maybe I didn't try my hardest. Oh, why do you
Yeah.
think you didn't try your hardest today? And now again, you're giving him that time to talk versus I think you could have ran a lot more and you should have worked harder and you should have done this, and they're just coming up and you're naturally making them go into a shell
Yeah.
as a kid. Wow, my dad or my mom, whoever is having this conversation with me, doesn't think highly of me.
Yeah.
Like, how do you think that's going to translate into their confidence?
Well,
Which is exactly what this topic is.
and let's also talk about the other ways that people try to sugarcoat that exact conversation, where they phrase it differently, but you're still getting the same results of you're not actually helping build confidence. Hey, Nick, I saw you running out there, but you missed a few passes. You need to make sure that when you're getting past you that you're moving laterally, because if you're not moving lateral, it's shut up first and
Yeah.
foremost. But secondly, what if we're breaking down that interaction with your kid of your intentions are good, I'll give you that. Your
Right.
intentions are you're trying to help build up
Right.
a skill set for them. But in that conversation, especially right after they messed up or in the middle of them messing up, whenever you see a kid swinging a bat incorrectly, I got to get your shoulders up, watch the ball, shoulders up and
Right.
watch the ball. What's the best case scenario in that exact moment? Because first and foremost, they're not thinking about what you're trying to do as coaching. So really, they're just hearing you yelling and talking to them about how they messed up on something. because
Sure.
they're not in that mindset of, hey, right now is when I can learn. Right now is a learning time.
Right.
No, they're either focusing on the play at hand, or they're focusing on how they just lost or won. And so that's not the right time to start coaching, even
Yeah.
if you are their coach. So I think also understanding when building confidence, there's a time and place to coach them
Address
up and
those.
and
Yeah.
address those things. I think, yeah, that's a better way to put it, to address those things.
And I'll even take it a step further in saying after a loss, I can remember myself. My mom, by the way, parents were divorced. My mom went to the most sporting events for me growing up. Never had a conversation that I can remember that I was like, "Can you shut up already?" It was very quiet. And if she's, "Oh, how did you do?" and it was open ended questions. But there
Yeah.
were sometimes when we did lose that I just wouldn't talk. And that was my way of internalizing, replaying things in my head as an
Yep.
athlete. And I didn't want to talk. And I think I don't know, the thing I appreciate most about that is she didn't force me to talk. And
Yeah.
there again, I think everybody's wired a little bit different. So, not to say all kids just process things that way, but I know I personally would internalize and replay things. And that was my moment to replay the game essentially and say, damn, I should have look to do this, make this decision in that scenario. But I didn't need my parents to help me do that. And I think sometimes parents underestimate some kids' ability to do that exact thing. Not to say, again, every kid cares enough, because some kids are just like, especially nowadays, straight onto the phone, be like, oh, who's saying what? And they could care less. But you do have some of those kids that do care, and they just need their time to think through things versus talk through things right away and say, son, what could you have improved on today? And I saw this because I was in the bleachers and I was on the 15th row and I could see everything. And you're just like, again, that perspective is so different. Your heart rate's not up. You've
Yeah.
got no defenders around you. You're seeing it from a bird's eye view.
Yeah. Third
That's a much
person.
different perspective than when you're in the moment with the defender running at you with the ball at your feet, having to make a quick decision.
Yeah.
So
Baseball.
and
A
that's
ball
where
is
parents
running right
always
down the
lose
middle.
context.
Yeah.
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 That's where parents always lose the context. It's so easy from the outside looking in.
Yeah.
And again, like you said, their intention is good. Intention is good. It's a totally different perspective.
Especially if it's kids. Like,
Yeah.
you're like, come on, son, run faster. You're an adult.
No,
Of course you can
yeah.
outrun the kids on the field.
And here's a comparative that has always stuck with me from my coaching days. And it's number one, no kid wakes up today saying, God, I really hope I get to disappoint my mom and dad today in my sporting event. No kid wakes up saying that.
Yeah.
So for you parents that want to just critique all day long, no kid intentionally messes up. Number two, let's flip it. If you're making eggs as a parent, Mom, hurry up, scramble the eggs. Come on. All you got to do is move the spatula around. Let's go. Pour the milk in. Let's go.
Gordon Ramsay, do this with them. Why are you not doing that?
Yeah,
It's the proper technique.
Fluff
Mom.
them up. Get the salt and pepper. Like, it's such a simple thing, mundane thing.
Yeah.
And let's flip those roles. But again, so sporting events, like you said, especially in the young ages, does it really matter? Let your kid figure things out a little bit. Stop trying to live vicariously through them because you want your social circle. You want to brag to them to say, oh, and my kid's the best on the team and does this and that.
Yeah, Little League. That's what every famous person does too. You hear them just brag about how their kid is just this amazing. No, they just brag about their kid and who they are, who their kid as a person is, not how well they're doing. Goodness.
Yeah, and not to mention, especially again going back to that and the unfortunate realities for some parents that live vicariously through the kids that use that as a, hey, this is how good of a parent I am because they're the best on the team. It doesn't matter when they're 8 and 9. Yeah. Like, ultimately, what are they doing when they're 20, 21, 25? Do they even play the sport anymore? Or do they despise it so much? Because when they were 8, they were the best on the team. But they weren't growing their love for the sport. They were growing the hate for the sport. Because they couldn't stand that environment that was created within the structure in which they were playing it.
Yeah.
There's your reality and our reality as parents. Is that kid still playing the game when they're 35 because they enjoy it? This is because it's always been fun for me.
Yeah,
I think that's the acid test for all of us as parents.
No, it's true. It's true. So, yeah, take some of these down. Some of these we got away from building a child's confidence thanks to a little bit from both of us. But I think it's all very pertinent still. If they enjoy the sport, they're going to have more confidence in the sport. And you can grow that confidence more, especially if they're enjoying it. Learn when to coach people up to build that confidence. If you're going to have some kids going into sports or if your kids are currently in sports.
Yep.
We are going to take a very short break, but then we're going to jump right into Real Estate Roundup, where this week we're going to be talking about why housing is not the next domino to fall after the stock market and international markets not crash, but start going in a downward trajectory. So we'll talk about that right when we're back, right after this.